you ever walked out of a really high stakes exchange? I mean, maybe a critical business negotiation or even just a painful disagreement with a family member. Or maybe it's that one colleague, you know the one, and you just walk out feeling completely disoriented. You go into it with, honesty, sincerity, trying to be principled, and you leave feeling drained, confused, and even worse, you start doubting your own memory of what actually happened. If that feeling sounds familiar, then you know exactly what it's like to be playing a game where the other person is not following any of the rules you are. It's like you're playing checkers, and they're playing this three-dimensional chess with a completely hidden rule book. This hidden rule book, this dark architecture of control, it's what allows manipulative people to consistently, exploit sincerity. Every single successful tactic, from a subtle psychological twist to these grand strategies that fracture power, they all rely on fundamental, predictable principles. And today, we are ripping the cover off that book. Okay, let's unpack this. This is the deep dive, and this is total life mastery, unspoken rules.
Our mission today is pretty simple. We're going to give you the blueprint. We're revealing the ancient strategies of statecraft that, frankly, formalize instrumental cruelty, alongside the modern psychological tactics used to just dismantle a person's reality. We've distilled some of the most potent sources, from Renaissance philosophy manuals for rulers, all the way to cutting-edge contemporary research on personality and psychological abuse. We're showing you these interconnected playbooks. This is about knowledge. It's about defense.
That's absolutely right. And to build on that, this deep dive is not a manual on how to use these tools. It's a manual on how to recognize them instantly, and then how to neutralize their effect. Our sources are all pretty much unanimous on this. The only way to effectively counter strategic manipulation is to understand its architecture better than the person using it against you. So we're exploring three intertwined playbooks: the deep psychology that drives exploitation, the original mandate for cunning, and then the devastating tactics used to break down your reality. For you listening, this is about recognizing the unwritten laws of these power dynamics so you can stop being the pawn on someone else's board, so you can maintain sovereignty over your own mind.
Okay, so to trace the contours of this hidden rulebook, we have to start with the players themselves, right? The architects. We're moving into the realm of personality psychology here, and a concept that's become really central to understanding this kind of long-term manipulative behavior: the dark triad.
The dark triad, yeah. It's a psychological construct, really more of a lens, that was introduced by researchers Delroy Paulus and Kevin Williams back in 2002. It basically serves to group together three distinct but often overlapping socially aversive personality traits. Those are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
And it's important to say we're talking about these at the subclinical level, right? This isn't necessarily about a formal diagnosis for everyone.
Exactly. That's a crucial point. These traits exist on a continuum in the general population. Think of them as pronounced personality styles that strongly predict a person's willingness to engage in exploitation.
So if we take those three, the need for admiration, the need for control, and the need for a thrill, and we put them in a Venn diagram, what's that single dark core that they all share? What's the common thread that makes them so dangerous?
The single crucial common thread is callousness and the willingness to exploit others. That is the psychological operating system of a manipulator. These individuals prioritize their own self-interest way above conventional morality. And this is the critical part: they can use charm, deception, and inflict real harm, emotional or material, without feeling genuine remorse or guilt.
They see people as tools.
As tools or as obstacles, not as fellow human beings who deserve empathy.
And that distinction, that capacity to act without guilt, that's what separates a normal person who, messes up from a true architect of control. We all make mistakes. We all might lie occasionally, but only a person high in the dark triad can execute a plan that destroys someone's career or their family life and then go to sleep soundly that night.
Precisely. They're fundamentally focused on getting ahead, often at a tremendous emotional or social cost to other people. Now, while they share this callous core, they are motivated by very distinct internal fuels. And this is where understanding their social signatures becomes critical for, identifying them out in the wild. We can even use a kind of map. It's called the interpersonal circumplex, which looks at agency, so dominance and communion friendliness versus hostility, to sort of plot how they interact with the world.
Okay, let's start with the one we hear about most often: narcissism. What's their singular motivational fuel?
Their fuel is overwhelmingly the craving for admiration, superiority, and attention. They desperately need to be in the spotlight. Their entire strategy, everything they do, revolves around ego maintenance. They are terrified of humiliation, terrified of being exposed for their deep internal insecurity.
So they court the crowd.
They court the crowd, they use grandiosity, superficial charm, anything to maintain that perceived superiority. So their social signature is what we'd call friendly dominant.
Okay, so that makes them, in a way, relatively easy to spot. They're the person who has to dominate the meeting, who takes credit for other people's work. They need constant applause. They control things by making sure everyone else sees them as the biggest, brightest star in the room.
Exactly. They want everyone to love the king.
They're the attention hog.
The classic attention hog. Now, contrast that immediately with the Machiavellian. This trait, and this is fascinating, is the only one of the triad that didn't originate in clinical psychology. It came from political philosophy, which is why it's a perfect bridge to the next part of our discussion. The Machiavellian's core fuel is the craving for control and strategic personal gain. They are always playing the long game.
Okay, so if the narcissist is the flashy frontman of the band, the Machiavellian is the quiet, calculating manager in the back room, how do we spot them if they aren't looking for attention?
Their key traits are cunning, pragmatism, and a really pervasive, deep-seated cynicism. They genuinely believe that everyone else is just as self-interested and deceptive as they are. So for them, lying and manipulating isn't immoral.
It's just smart.
It's just pragmatic self-defense.
Yeah.
They operate with a cold, unemotional affect, that callousness we talked about, and they have this strategic, calculating orientation focused on long-term goals. And their social signature is totally different from the narcissist. They lean towards hostile, submissive behavior.
Hostile submissive, how does that work?
They prefer to be the quiet puppeteer pulling the strings.
Ugh.
Think of the coworker who seems helpful on the surface but secretly withholds key information. Or they subtly spread rumors or strategically sabotage a colleague's access to resources, all to advance their own standing, but quietly. They're willing to take on a submissive role temporarily if it helps them achieve their ultimate goal of control.
That's a key difference. The narcissist needs that validation right now. The Machiavellian is patient enough to wait 2 years for the perfect moment to strike. And that strategic long game is what makes them so profoundly dangerous in the corporate world or in long-term relationships.
Indeed. And finally, that brings us to psychopathy, which is often the most openly destructive and impulsive of the three. What motivates this trait? The driving fuel here is a craving for stimulation, thrill, and dominance. They are often cold-hearted, bold, irresponsible. They exhibit the most pronounced antisocial behavior, severely diminished empathy, and a real lack of genuine remorse. Their social signature is inclined towards hostile dominant behavior. They want to directly assert power and are usually the most reckless of the three.
When you look at psychopathy, it can seem like this big monolithic concept, but our sources point to a more nuanced way of understanding it, the triarchic model. How does that help us break it down?
Yeah, the triarchic model is really useful for categorizing their behavior. It breaks psychopathy into 3 dimensions. There's boldness, which is confidence, social poise, fearlessness. Then there's meanness, which is that core callousness and the explicit willingness to exploit people. And finally, disinhibition, which shows up as impulsivity, recklessness, and a real lack of planning.
I see. So a person high in boldness and disinhibition might be taking huge, risky bets in the market or engaging in really erratic personal behavior.
Exactly. And when you add meanness to that mix, that's when the exploitation becomes purely intentional and harmful.
So we've got the narcissist, who's friendly dominant and needs admiration. The Machiavellian, hostile submissive, needs long-term control. And the psychopath, hostile dominant, needs thrill. But what truly makes the dark triad an architect of control is, like you said, the blending of these traits.
Exactly. The real risk isn't one trait in isolation. The most dangerous personalities are those who can fluidly switch masks depending on the situation. They can weaponize the charm and confidence of the narcissist to seduce their target into a position of trust. Then they can employ the strategic patience and cunning of the Machiavellian to plan the long game. And finally, they can execute the exploitation with the utter coldness and lack of emotional entanglement of the psychopath. This blending lets them move from seduction to strategic positioning to destruction seamlessly.
That blending, that ability to be strategic and just utterly ruthless, is the perfect transition. Because, as you mentioned, Machiavellianism isn't rooted in modern psychology. It's rooted in the original blueprint for instrumental manipulation. Niccolo Machiavelli's infamous 16th century treatise, The Prince. It's pretty astonishing that this philosophy, written for actual royalty 500 years ago, is still playing out in our offices and our homes today. Let's dig into this historical context.
Machiavelli was writing during a period of just immense political chaos and change in Renaissance Italy. His work wasn't a moral treatise, it was a pragmatic instruction manual, a manual for how rulers could actually acquire and, more importantly, maintain power in a very dangerous world. He was trying to resolve political conflicts through practical rather than idealistic means.
He rejected the utopian thinking of his time.
Completely. He looked at human nature with a stark realism. He observed that people, in general, are fickle, ambitious, deceptive, and driven by self-preservation. And if that is the fundamental nature of your subjects and your enemies, you just can't rule based on trust and good faith alone.
And this leads us directly to the core tenet that defines the Machiavellian strategy. The ends justify the means. So for the prince, or in modern terms, the Machiavellian strategist, what does that liberation from conventional morality actually look like?
Well, for Machiavelli, the ruler operates under a totally separate code from the ordinary morality of the people. The prince has only one non-negotiable moral objective: the stability, security, and preservation of the state. Or, in an interpersonal context, the stability of their own power base. So if an action, even one we'd conventionally consider dishonest, cruel, or immoral, like lying, breaking promises, using what he called necessary ruthlessness, achieves that supreme objective, then it is acceptable.
It's a purely instrumental, pragmatic approach to holding on to power.
Exactly. And this pragmatism required a specific set of skills he called virtue. Now, this is often mistranslated as virtue in the moral sense, but that's completely wrong. Here, virtue means shrewdness, skill, vigor, and most importantly, adaptability. The prince has to possess this adaptive skill set to navigate the unpredictable, chaotic forces of fortuna, which is fate or circumstance.
That's a fascinating distinction. So it's not about being lucky, it's about being ready for bad luck. Fortuna is the chaotic, unpredictable river flowing through history, and virtue is the engineering skill the prince needs to build a dam or change course when the river shifts.
That's a perfect analogy. The Machiavellian strategist is an adaptive master. If circumstances shift from war to peace or from prosperity to hardship, the ruler has to be flexible and pragmatic. They must be willing to abandon long-held policies or even personal friendships if the security of the state dictates it.
In personal terms, this means they'll drop loyalties the second those loyalties stop serving their ultimate goal.
Without a second thought. And this flexibility gives birth to maybe the most famous metaphor in political cunning: the rule of the beast. Machiavelli advises that the prince has to be ready to use two ways to fight: through law, like a man, and by force or cunning, like a beast. Specifically, the ruler must be both the lion and the fox.
The ability to switch modes is key for survival.
It's essential. The lion represents necessary force and strength. The lion can scare away the wolves and crush opponents, symbolizing the capacity for decisive, intimidating action. But the lion isn't enough.
Right, because the lion can't see the traps.
Exactly. So you also need to be the fox, which represents necessary deception and shrewdness. The fox, being sly, avoids the traps set by others. So cunning is critical for survival in a world where just being strong isn't always enough.
And this is where we run straight into the ethical paradox that makes Machiavelli so controversial. He famously tackled the question of whether a ruler should aim to be loved or feared.
And his conclusion is perhaps the most cynical yet enduring observation about human nature. If a prince can't be both loved and feared, which is a very difficult balance to maintain, he is better off being feared than loved.
That sounds profoundly depressing in a modern context. I mean, surely in a successful organization or family, a leader who only focuses on fear just creates instability and resentment, right? Isn't genuine loyalty more effective than just compliance?
Oh, absolutely. In an ideal world, loyalty is better. But Machiavelli's reasoning is brutally realistic. He argues that men, being the wretched creatures that they are, will break the bond of love whenever it directly benefits them. You know, when the going gets tough or a better opportunity comes along. Love is fragile, it depends on good times. But fear, he observes, is maintained by a dread of punishment, which is always effective.
Fear is a more reliable mechanism.
A far more reliable, predictable mechanism for ensuring obedience and order when the prince is facing a real crisis. In short, fear works when love fails.
And this pragmatism flows directly into the core Machiavellian tactic we see in relationships today: strategic lying and the necessity of appearance. What's the unspoken rule about honesty for the prince?
The unspoken rule is crystal clear. A prince should only keep his word when it benefits the mission or the state. Machiavelli isn't shy about this at all. He argues that history proves that rulers who have known how to beguile men's minds by shrewdness and cunning have been more successful than those who just relied on being truthful.
Why?
Because the world itself is full of liars who won't keep faith with you anyway. So operating on some naive notion of honesty is just a recipe for disaster. And this brings us to the core performance that's required. The prince must be a great pretender and dissembler. Managing public perception is everything. It's not enough to just deceive. The prince has to master the art of the veneer. It is absolutely necessary to appear virtuous, to seem compassionate, faithful, guileless, religious, even if your actions have to be the opposite.
The deception has to be so masterful that the appearance of honesty keeps the public disarmed and trusting.
Exactly. The appearance is the armor, and the cynicism is the blade. This realization that the manipulator must be the great pretender, that's what connects the 16th century blueprint directly to the dark tactics we see today.
And Machiavelli provides a pretty chilling justification for why this deception works so well, doesn't he?
He does. He says that since men are so simple and so prone to be won over by necessities, that a deceiver will always find someone who is willing to be deceived. He suggests the public is often willingly seduced by the appearance of virtue, which makes the strategic use of lies and excuses a really powerful, low-cost tool.
They're almost waiting to be lied to, if the lie is dressed up convincingly.
In a sense, yes. And Machiavelli notes, if the deceit is ever noticed, excuses must always be ready to immediately cover the action.
That calculated philosophy gives us the foundation for the tactical blueprint of exploitation we see everywhere today. Let's shift from statecraft to psychological warfare. Let's look at two devastating tactics that exploit the cognitive and relational weaknesses of individuals and groups. We're talking about gaslighting and divide and rule, which often shows up interpersonally as triangulation. Let's start with gaslighting. It's a term we hear a lot, but we need to really understand the mechanism of abuse that turns a simple lie into a weapon against someone's sanity. Gaslighting is a profoundly insidious form of emotional abuse and psychological manipulation. Its core objective is to make the victim question their perception, their memory, and ultimately, their own sanity. When it's successful, it leads to this catastrophic loss of self-agency and a dependence on the manipulator for reality validation. The term, of course, comes from that old play, Gaslight, where the husband subtly manipulates the environment, dimming the lights, moving things, and then denies anything changed, driving his wife to believe she's losing her mind. But how does this really work on a cognitive level? It's so much more than just lying.
It relies on what psychologists call epistemic leverage. Think of your mind like a complex computer operating system. We rely on close, trusted relationships to fulfill these essential epistemic needs, the need to verify and shape our view of the world. A loved one, a trusted parent, a close colleague, they're part of your external validation system.
Okay.
So when a trusted person constantly denies facts, twists narratives, or minimizes your feelings, that privilege, that epistemic leverage, allows them to compromise your operating system. You start assuming the operating system, the trusted person, is correct. And therefore, any glitch must be in your faulty hardware, your memory or perception.
Wow.
The victim starts thinking, if this person I trust says I'm imagining things, maybe I really am unstable.
That is a stunning analogy. It's an attack on the victim's core ability to process objective reality. And because the abuse is so gradual, it often starts subtly, right? Disguised by superficial affection.
Absolutely. The pattern is insidious. It rarely starts with an overt attack. It often begins subtly, sometimes even masked by intense love bombing or grand gestures to quickly establish deep trust and emotional dependence. That initial phase makes the victim vulnerable. But then the abuse gradually escalates, denying minor facts, then major facts, then memories, weakening the victim's defenses until they become entirely dependent on the manipulator's version of reality.
So if we're looking for this hidden rule book in action, what are the specific phrases or behaviors that give a gaslighter away? What are the clear signals?
The behaviors generally fall into three categories: denial, blame shifting, and minimization. For blatant denial, you'll hear phrases that attack the memory of the event itself. I never said that, you must be crazy, or you've completely fabricated that memory. It's an erasure of history.
Right, and blame shifting.
For blame shifting, the gaslighter avoids all responsibility and changes the narrative to make the victim feel at fault for the abuser's own mistakes. For example, if they were caught cheating, they might say something like, "Well, I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't been so distant recently." The focus shifts immediately from their transgression to the victim's perceived failure.
And minimization is maybe the most emotionally damaging, because it attacks your very right to feel something.
Precisely. Minimization trivializes the victim's emotional response. This is where you hear, "You're just imagining things," or "Why are you always so sensitive?" or "It was just a joke, calm down."
It denies the validity of the victim's internal experience.
And the non-apology, that's a classic. A critical, sophisticated form of minimization is the non-apology, which sounds like, "I'm sorry you think I hurt you." That subtle insertion of "you think" deflects all responsibility and subtly implies the problem is with the victim's overly sensitive interpretation, not the manipulator's action. And on top of that, to really cement their control, gaslighters will frequently question the credibility of the victim's friends and family, isolating the victim and suggesting everyone else secretly thinks the victim is unstable or overreacting.
The consequences of this aren't just emotional, they're physically and mentally debilitating. They can push people to the brink.
The persistent, chronic stress of navigating a perpetually distorted reality leads to profound psychological trauma. We see pervasive anxiety, deep-seated depression, a complete erosion of self-worth and trust in one's own judgment. Victims experience chronic self-doubt, diminished decision-making capabilities in every area of their life. In the long term, this insidious, unrelenting psychological warfare can lead to serious mental health conditions, including CPTSD and a loss of identity known as depersonalization.
Okay, so if gaslighting is the attack on our internal reality, what happens when the attack comes from the outside? When it's aimed at fracturing our team, our family, or our organization? That brings us to the second key tactic: divide and rule, or triangulation.
Divide et impera, divide and rule, is an ancient, profoundly effective strategy. It was used by figures like Philip II of Macedon and heavily institutionalized by the Roman Empire, for example, in managing newly conquered provinces. The strategy is to acquire and maintain power by breaking up any large concentration of power, be it a political opposition, a military alliance, or a unified team of employees, into smaller, weaker factions. Factions that are too busy fighting each other to unite against the central authority. We can even see the formalized application of this in what's called the kleptocracy model. Rulers who govern solely to extract wealth for themselves. Kleptocrats use divide and rule to sustain their power. They exploit the fragility of social cooperation. When they face a threat, the kleptocrat intensifies the problem by offering selective incentives, like zero taxes or exclusive access to resources, and selective punishments, maximum tax, severe penalties, or even elimination to different groups. This calculated inequality ensures that no viable coalition can form that's strong enough to challenge the ruler.
So the goal is to keep everyone insecure and competing for crumbs, making sure they never look up to see who's holding the whole loaf.
Precisely. And the stronger the central authority is at credibly punishing any challenger, the more successful they are at using this fragmentation strategy.
That makes perfect sense on a geopolitical level.
Yeah.
But how does this translate into the toxicity we see in a family, a friend group, or a modern office?
In those smaller personal and professional contexts, it's most commonly known as triangulation. This is the intentional use of a third party to create tension, conflict, or division between two individuals. And this ultimately establishes the manipulator as the indispensable central authority, the mediator, or even the victim.
Can you give an example, like in a family?
Sure, consider a family dynamic. A narcissistic parent might intentionally designate a golden child who gets all the unearned praise and a scapegoat who gets blamed for every minor issue. Now, this isn't about love or discipline. It is pure control. The parent keeps both children in a constant state of insecurity, competing for affection, and viewing their sibling as a threat to their survival. And then the manipulator swoops in and assumes the role of savior or peacemaker when they intervene to calm the aggression they themselves created.
Wow. And in the corporate world, this gets much more subtle, playing right into the Machiavellian's need for control and the psychopath's love of chaos.
Yes. Corporate psychopaths use divide and conquer as a smokescreen for their own power advancement. They might instigate conflicts between two different departments, say marketing and sales, by subtly favoring one or misrepresenting the goals of the other. This is done by seeding disputes and creating psychological isolation, making it easier for them to assert control amid the chaos they've created. While the departments are busy fighting each other, the dark architect is quietly consolidating influence with leadership.
So the key identifying feature is that the manipulator is intentionally gaining power or resources or notoriety from the confusion they engineered.
Exactly. They isolate individuals, forcing them to rely on the manipulator's version of events, and that prevents the team from ever standing unified against them. They thrive in the vacuum created by confusion and distrust.
We've mapped the enemy's playbook. From the cold motivations of the Dark Triad to the tactical application of deceit and division. This knowledge is our power, and now we have to shift our focus entirely to defense. The objective here is simple and it's strategic, to become an unprofitable target.
The necessity of active self-defense cannot be overstated. Chronic manipulation is not just annoying, it is genuinely detrimental to both your mental and physical health. It leads to emotional exhaustion, it corrodes your self-worth and trust, and it causes predictable mental health issues. To neutralize the manipulator's power, we have to cut off their essential fuel source.
The first, and maybe the most famous, counter tactic that deals directly with the narcissist and psychopath's need for that emotional fuel is the gray rock method.
It sounds deceptively simple, but it's really a psychological jujitsu move.
It is. It's fundamentally rooted in behavioral psychology, specifically the concept of extinction. The goal is to manage interactions with toxic individuals, especially those with narcissistic or psychopathic tendencies, by making yourself as emotionally uninteresting as possible. You become a plain gray rock that no one even notices on the beach.
And why does this work so effectively against the Dark Triad? Because manipulators, particularly the narcissist and the psychopath, they crave emotional reactions. They seek attention, validation, conflict, any kind of drama. What's often called narcissistic supply or psychopathic supply. By starving them of this emotional fuel, you disrupt their core operational pattern. If an interaction with you is boring, predictable, and devoid of any emotional reward, they will eventually lose interest.
You're no longer a rewarding target.
Exactly. Over time, this often reduces the frequency or the intensity of their provoking behaviors because it's just no fun for them anymore.
So this is a strategy for when contact is unavoidable, right?
Yeah.
Co-parenting, dealing with toxic family you have to see at holidays, or managing a difficult colleague or boss. What are the practical techniques for actually implementing the gray rock method, especially when the manipulator is actively trying to bait you? We need specifics.
Rigorous consistency is the absolute key. Your communication has to be flat, minimal, and entirely factual. Your responses should be non-committal and non-engaging. Often, they're limited to one-word answers or simple phrases. Okay, I hear you, or I'll consider that.
And the key rule.
The key rule. You have to refuse to share any personal information, emotion, opinion, or vulnerability that the manipulator could potentially weaponize later. If they ask about your weekend, the gray rock answer is, "It was fine," not, "It was great, we went hiking, but my knee hurts and I'm stressed about a meeting." You give them nothing to grab onto.
Okay, let's imagine a scenario. A toxic colleague is baiting you in the hallway about a mistake you made, hoping for a defensive explosion or tears. What does effective gray rock look like in that moment?
If the manipulator says, "I heard you messed up that Jones account last week. Are you sure you're capable of handling this kind of pressure?" Your internal system will be screaming to defend yourself, but the gray rock response is simply, "I am handling my accounts," or "I appreciate your input," and then you walk away.
And your demeanor.
In terms of your presentation, you maintain neutral body language, minimize any prolonged eye contact, and speak in a steady, monotone voice. If they escalate the insults or accusations, you have to sidestep the direct confrontation. Do not defend yourself against their false narratives. That just gives them power. Instead, you say, "I understand you feel that way," or "That is noted," and then you end the conversation as quickly and as safely as possible. Consistency in maintaining this emotional detachment is crucial for the long-term success of the method, even though, and we have to acknowledge this, it is mentally fatiguing and it requires constant self-care afterward.
That brings us to countering the specific tactical attacks we discussed. Let's start with gaslighting, the attack on reality itself. If someone is trying to convince you that your memory is faulty, how do we fight back with objective reality?
The antidote to self-doubt is objective evidence, which means rigorous reality testing. You have to externalize your reality. You can no longer rely solely on your internal memory. You need proof outside of yourself.
Documentation.
Exactly. This means keeping a detailed external record of every contentious or confusing event. Use a digital diary or a notebook that the manipulator can't access. Record dates, times, specific communications. Save emails and texts. Make detailed notes immediately after an interaction detailing what was said, by whom, and in what context. This physical evidence becomes the fortress that protects your reality when the manipulator tries to deny previous events or agreements.
In this documentation, it isn't about being paranoid. It's about establishing an objective baseline for yourself.
Precisely. It's an essential psychological tool to maintain your sanity. Furthermore, actively seeking an outside perspective is vital. Breaking the isolation the manipulator wants to impose is critical. Share your documented reality with trusted friends, family, or professionals who can reaffirm your perceptions and validate your experiences. They provide that external calibration your mind needs.
Now, for the tactic of triangulation or fragmentation, how do you rebuild trust and unity when the Machiavellian is actively trying to pit people against each other, say in a workplace or a complex family structure?
The strategy against fragmentation is unity and transparency. The first countermeasure is to promote direct communication. If a third party, let's call them person C, brings you a negative report about person B, the counter-Machiavellian response is to immediately refuse that indirect communication. You encourage person C to talk to person B directly, or you state clearly that you will go to person B yourself to verify the information.
By doing that, you instantly remove the manipulator's ability to operate in the shadows.
You take away their main tool, which is gossip. The rule becomes, if you won't say it directly to them, I won't listen to it from you. This forces transparency and direct accountability.
And in environments where high-stakes decisions are being made, like at work, how do we stop the Machiavellian from shifting blame and escaping trouble?
We enforce public accountability. Encourage decisions and assignments to be agreed upon publicly, either in recorded meetings, detailed follow-up emails copied to all relevant parties, or posted on a shared digital space. When a Machiavellian individual's commitment is witnessed by a group and documented, it becomes exponentially harder for them to deny their involvement, shift blame, or try to slink out of trouble later.
You shine a public light on their actions.
And that neutralizes the hidden nature of their schemes. Finally, within your trusted circles, you have to actively refuse to be a receptive audience for malicious gossip. If a coworker starts speaking ill of another, you respond with a positive or neutral statement about the person being attacked, or you simply change the subject. This signals that you are not going to participate in the fragmentation. By standing together, handling disagreements constructively and internally, and refusing to harbor malicious gossip, groups maintain the unity that makes them entirely invincible to the divide and rule strategy.
So resilience isn't just about surviving the attack. It's about proactively building a fortress of external evidence, direct communication, and strong factual boundaries that the manipulator just cannot breach. It shifts the entire dynamic.
That is the ultimate goal. Long-term resilience requires strengthening your personal support systems, your trusted friends, family, community, and cultivating self-compassion to actively repair the self-worth and decision-making capabilities that have been damaged by emotional abuse. You have to develop emotional intelligence not just to recognize their triggers, but to recognize and manage your own, ensuring you maintain sovereignty over your internal life, regardless of the chaos outside.
We've taken a deep dive into the hidden playbooks of power. We've mapped the shadow architecture used to control others. We've explored the cold motivations of the dark triad, the ancient political cunning required to rule, even through deception, and the specific tactics designed to fracture your mind like gaslighting, or your relationships like divide and rule. But the greatest single defense we uncovered isn't really a tactic or a tool. It's psychological agency. The ability to act independently, to trust your own judgment, and to defend the truth of your own experience, even when someone is desperately trying to erode it. Machiavelli taught that a prince has to be able to use the lion's strength and the fox's cunning just to survive in a chaotic world.
And this raises a final provocative question for you, the learner, the strategist. If you find yourself in the necessary position of dealing with a toxic presence that thrives on your emotion, what precise combination of fierce strength in setting firm, non-negotiable, documented boundaries and calculated cunning-in emotional withdrawal, like the Grey Rock method, must you master just to protect your internal peace and maintain absolute sovereignty over your own mind?
They say that every interaction is a contract. And the final unspoken rule of total life mastery is that you can't gain this knowledge and leave without leaving your mark. And neither can we. If this deep dive gave you the blueprint to recognize the shadow players in your life and to defend yourself, we need you to signal your mastery. like this deep dive to confirm to the algorithm that knowledge is truly power and that we deserve to dominate the information game. Comment below with a single unspoken rule, the concept, the defensive strategy, the tactical definition that you found most surprising. Let's build a shared defense library for the community. Ring the bell, that small notification mechanism so you never miss the moment we reveal the next hidden principle of power. And if you haven't already joined our ranks, subscribe now. Go forward, not as a victim who navigates blind, but as a strategist who knows the map. We'll see you in the next deep dive.